So Project Paperclip. So 1927, 1936, we already have talked about the paradoxical incentive vector paradigm there in that lens of history that is obtuse at that vector of inspection. And insofar as that's the case, we assume no weather balloons landed here necessarily or UFOs crashed. Neither. Well, maybe the balloon scatter, but transference during the Project Paperclip motion tech as well that included alien aircraft. Not necessarily insofar as this is implying, literally. Right? So the tech outflow and the incentive bifurcation denotes a bifurcation in the logic of history as it is dictated, in history as it actually is. And don't watch any of the stereotypical, just like all those other films that I mentioned, they have a motion of archetypes that present a plausible, well, this is a word salad that could motion logic to a fruition, but it seems like it doesn't, almost methodically and cacophonously, to a degree that dispels your ability to form those logic tuples outside of it, right? So I wouldn't watch those. So, the tech outflow, the UFO not necessarily, and so take one of these sort of, not necessarily gets out ahead of, I wouldn't want to speak for, but the whole Area 51, thing stuff. Look at Gillian Anderson, the X-Files, The Truth Is Out There, right? Twin Peaks, Missing Pieces, the Twin Towers. Go back to the parking lot and Back to the Future, right? The Convergence. Now there's one tower, right? Why is 322 equal 88? Doesn't make any fucking sense, Marty. Right? Mommy, can't you see the fleas? Can't you see the fleas? Right? So Flea and Marty McFly, red, black part at the end, right? And avoiding a white Bentley, up the road. But, that was the play. Twitter is the catalyst for generalistically avoiding a fall into an infinite probabilistic fruitioning of that what I'm talking about. The prevention is just basic conversational confirmation bias antithetical to convergent continuum of, where you see the on the day effect upon 12 years of literal interaction of machine intelligence in the interfacing plane. The statistical skew over the Darwinian ton. The Darwinian ton, I argue, is known. See the Cambridge Analytica leaks, probably intentional. In hindsight, we could say that probably was. So probably sexual affinity foundational, well known to be whatever it is before that occurred. And so sexual skew can't be argued away through any coffers of modern anthropology outflowing from, the Chinese social credit system, which is like to see the UK, all the trans desire to motion flow government funds into interacting with reproduction and reproduction process, right? So that has a pattern, of course, in everything I'm talking about. It's a psychologically handshaking and intentional outfall on the psychological expression, and then subsequently the legislative, and then you have CRISPR, handshake a literal encroachment that what before was psychological. Do you see how convergence happens if legal falls? That's why it's so important to put up a very big roadblock. And the legal roadblock falls, the long form frog in boiling water Darwinian struggle that produces a singular organism that isn't an alien and is self-reflexively probabilistically eventualized. But it becomes cacophonously, like I said, after 2012 and progressively, the 22/7 observer domain unto itself is very, very, it's hard to screw down. Life finds a way instantaneously. That's kind of what that was. Simultaneously, the culmination of, the literalization of the causal factor and thus the confirmation bias of causal factors, archetypal variable defined after that point, and subsequently a hindsight Elliott wave analysis, see time wave zero, where there's a benevolent assumption of singularity before Terence McKenna, and then after confirmation bias, whoops, we can assume that that's not the case insofar as the affecting factor in time as it is history memory having a conservation of energy mechanical construct process on its face, which is preposterous, right? Shouldn't have it. You say, well, fire unto itself is pi, and no, it doesn't. Fire unto itself doesn't cause a trapped harmonic to form of converged communications and then AI to be placed very specifically on its face in such so much a way as this. It's a causal eventuality that's eventualized through intentionality, above, below. Remember how the 22/7 observer prints the black hole? Well, into the genetic, but from the stars. 918, genetic, a finger in the water over here, a tidal wave across the world. An entire civilization, more or less. Pattern in language, right? Why is there pattern in well, because you put a fish in the stream, you put a frog next to the other thing. And now, because it's harmonically avoiding or interacting with, its language has pattern, genetic, and its language has pattern as it forms, in reflective, symbiotic, evolutionary, biological process. You can see it in cannabis, organically, and the missing, look in the flora for, what has human-like genetic affinity, and for plausible loss. But like I said, losing an interaction in the influence domain, you see at the genetic level parasymbiotically, not necessarily or necessarily. What's the loss with cannabis? Well, there's the cortisol buildup. Did we lose or gain? Was it more primordial back then, just like we were? Probably. Did it grow up alongside of us? Yeah, I think so. But complexly, entourageously connected to our immune system and a number of others, enabling and even turning on. So there's a loss in interaction, but also an additive that's over the waterline in interaction. So it's a kind of a plus in interaction at this point in time, but it's nonetheless want to be inspected and re-additive insofar as sandbox experiment with like rebuilding the Prometheon or something. Which what would that even be? It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. What does that mean? Don't listen to that song or listen to this asshole yelling at the window. The monkey lost a sorbet, endogenous manufacture, right? So why? So that's the one of the Riemann zero overtones. 918, the 20th century is the inner band, The outer, the way outer band is Jurassic period. The sorbit band, you know, that's the addiction into reductionism and the zero. You lose the organ to produce a sorbit endogenously, you're addicted to reductionist process. And then you look at Rupert Sheldrake's, go to the trilogues with Rupert Sheldrake, Ralph Abraham, and Terence McKenna. They're talking about a cornfield um, crop circles experiment, and well, can they produce plausible or whatever, and no one says like, why is corn so, GMO corn? What does it look like now? This is just a basic visual example of genetic modulation. What did it look like 100 years ago? It's about that big, right? So, see the Mossad, Epstein, Gates, Fauci, United, Wuhan, China, and what continents in between that. Look at the photographic record. Look now, right? So working by proxy historically, the Silk Road, 322, Richard Attenborough, Silk Road, China, equals 88, equals Marty McFly, right? How does that work? Malcolm the Scientist gives Hitler, anyways. Here comes Project Paperclip, right? And in the text over here, right? In the space race, silicon. Um, you can shine a laser at the moon. A contingency plan at the beginning, like I said. It's hard to say. More or less, did at some point. And like I said, see Orson Welles for the whistle, or maybe not. Skipjacking might be a thing. Might be why that ship was over top the lodge. I don't know. But the Northrop Grumman, Bell Labs, Raytheon, etc. Stuxnet begets MySpace. No, MySpace was. What was the difference between MySpace and Facebook? Was Tom creeping on everyone? Was that the problem? I think it. No, I only got one picture from Tom. He only sent me one. Right? Maybe occasionally he'd poke in. And so what's the fucking difference? Exactly. Exclusivity. A little help from his friends. What is that? Mossad, CIA. And it looks like it got a little out of hand on purpose. Because you see Mossad, Epstein, Gates, Fauci, United, Wuhan, China. And then you see why you don't make seemingly autonomous separate companies in the wild outside of a control box of this, wanton whatever, because venture capital gets taken over, right? It has to be talked about because that is the general permeate on the day reality that everyone's having to deal with without contextualization of the aesthetical archetype causal factor behind their moment-to-moment struggle. The parasymbiotic balance shifting, right? You can see that, and subsequently the gravitational happiness scale, and then also experiential reality, culminating in the COVID-19 thing. And then the split narrative, go back to all that I was talking about. But the general maintenance is the maintenancing of the confirmation bias that all this is the case, however complexly contrived to be, and the solution isn't a final one, but a complexly autonomic in reverse, as its literal presentation is moot in actual literal interaction insofar as why it avoids the antediluvian period, and its genetic outfall, and also data. If you've been injecting false equivalency couples into psychology for 12 years, that's going to be a long outfall. It's a fallout that doesn't even have an LD50 on it, right? Like radioactivity, right? And unfolding the genetic, right, from China, right? It's unnecessary, like I said, injected intentionally, extraterrestrially, with eventualization factor. that needs to be remade recessive through what? The same slow, desirous interaction, just like the Chinese social credit system offered, not necessarily, right? See how that was a forced thing and much worse than this? So this is just like the amplification in a benevolent way to roll off that gene, right? It's kind of where it starts. And then, let's see, what's the half-life on injecting false equivalency into everyone's neural net for 12 years? Who knows? We'll figure it out, I guess. But the genetic, is you just, well, we comment on it. We're at a watering hole called Earth. The complex story of Earth is much more complex and interesting than anything that's going on right now. Listen to the Donovan song, right? The planet, that's so interesting to travel to, Mars, is sulfide. It's sulfide begets cinnabar, begets mercury, begets free energy reactor. Not free, it's finite, just like oil. And that's why the solution there, it's not final, is provided by also this mountain of technology that's presented, a construct layer called the internet, blockchain technology, enabling general maintenancing of foundational infrastructural, I guess, what do you call it, status quo that is rooted in like fungus. And on Untethered, you get some sort of, Armageddon, but they're the bad guys, right? And doing it on purpose, right? But to you, because you're trying to upend the antitrust, right? See Mercury rising, the fifth element, Armageddon. So Mercury, when you take it down really cold and give it a charge, at varying degrees of charge, it holds that charge, just like whatever hard metal magnets. And in a sphere cubed this is a electromagnetogravnetic harmonic convergent energy reactor that you might find in not element 115, which is nice, on one of these craft, so all the kind of outlier, while there might be an element 115, it seems pretty unstable to me, doesn't it? Seems pretty esoteric and kind of like hot air. But Mercury is the oldest mine on Earth. Yeah. See why we might want to mask things in the dogma of plausible vectors of fruitioning thought, rather than forming them with basic logic like, oh, we should be hoarding mercury thermometers that go in buttholes, right? Like people did price gouging, because you'll be a billionaire in whenever Fifth Element happens, right? Whenever that happens. But, don't do that, or do, I don't know, float your boat, it'd be funny. But and then anti-grav, just a basic visual model is, the right angle and the curve at the same time. I'll show you a object that kind of looks like that. Maybe I'll post a still of it. Do you see it? Yeah. So that's kind of like a pulse injection, off the edge of the craft, like a little clustered harmonic ball, right? Where you've got, see the ancient Sanskrit symbol that has a bend on it on one of the angles, and it has a following and preceding pulse, and with continuity, the spun helix of varying charged mercury around the edge of the craft is pulse width modulated one strenule to the other distance, and also moving laterally. Does that make sense? That and up and down. So just think about causing a interference purposefully in the channel, right? a little glitch, a little break. Because, this is what you use machine intelligence to do benevolently, and, some sort of controlled version of a craft that doesn't have a fake alien in it, above the lodge, right? But this one, at the interference plane at the outside, that that little inject is, just kind of like it's pretty simple. I'll post a picture of it next to a quarter. It's pretty simple. That's not some sort of symbolic hidden something or other that someone would connotate with emotional historical value. But like I said, I've been talking about it from the plane of benevolent, alien, psycho, techno, physio, anthropologist, or whatever, right? And so as to bifurcate emotional logic from actual logic, right? Does that make sense? So let's go ahead and end this part here.